about during a live event, they've got the chance to do it. So these are all kind of advantages that you can have. Also, there can be virtually free. Obviously, you might want to pay for the time of moderators and stuff for any online stuff, but it's way cheaper to run a virtual event. And this makes it a lot easier for people to attend. And it's also better for the climate as well, to not travel thousands of miles collectively for everybody to attend. So these are some of the real advantages of virtual events. One thing you do have to be mindful for is if you have a chat function, whether it's just on Zoom or you have an associated Slack channel or some sort of social media, is that you want to make sure your delegates are safe and that nobody's getting harassed or putting offensive stuff, or even just well-meaning things like a GIF that is flashing and could trigger people to have seizures. And you need to make sure that there is a strict set of rules and a code of conduct, and that's enforced with, I think, really a kind of like one strike policy. Anybody who's putting anything harassing or rude in the chat is just out of there. And again, that's something quite easy to do with a virtual event, more so than an in-person event. Anastasia, anything else? Any other thoughts about virtual events?
No, I think you pretty much covered everything. I just want to ask people if they discuss something we didn't mention, and then like we can include it.
Sorry to interrupt you. I have another possible pro. Like, I don't know if it's a pro, but wearing pajama under the blazer might be pro.
Yes. Yeah, this is a real pro. And also, just, you know, if you have any mobility problems, it's much easier. And also there's a lot of people who are disabled in ways that you can't necessarily see, but they might become very fatigued. And so being able to dip in and out without being seen as being rude or not engaging is a real advantage. Because then you don't have to worry about leaving the room in the middle of a talk if you're not able to stay the whole time. Or you might just have, like, you know, your kids shouting in the background, or you might find it really boring and you can just leave. And so it's a lot freer in that sense.
I have another negative point for the virtual event. May I?
Yes, please.
Yes. So I guess that it's more difficult to evaluate the participation of the people, because in presence you can have passive people, you can have people that don't want to talk or that don't care anyway, but you can figure out a bit because you can see them. During virtual events, this is not the same things, and you don't even know if people are there or not. So it's more difficult to evaluate this.
I think this is a very good point, and also I would add the eye contact. So when you usually have people around, it's like a much different sense. You can also exchange ideas much more, I would say, effectively.
Yes.
Dialogue is enabled much more successfully. So this is something I also noticed from participation in virtual conferences, that I couldn't get the feedback that I could get from in-person events.
Yeah, I think like the engagement is just generally a lot worse in a virtual event. From my experience, like you just don't get as many people come into like the sessions because they're not like physically in the building in a way. Whereas like when you're actually like there at a conference, like you tend to go to a lot more sessions than I have at like the virtual events. You kind of seek out things that are a bit different. Whereas like some of the sessions that I've been at is like basically being the authors plus like a couple of other people, but not a huge breadth of people.
Yeah, that's a good one. Anything else that before we go to the in-person events, which we can also start adding?
Maybe I can add some another negative point
about
the motivation of participants, because I already organize a virtual event inside my laboratory, and I know that some people, for public or participant, was not how to say, was not and didn't enjoy the idea to have another virtual event, especially at this time of COVID. And the result is I had less participants than usual, and this includes the participant and the public, the audience. So
what do you consider as the main reason for this? You mentioned
the over-representativity of the virtual event, maybe, because all the people in my lab spend their time front of the screen, and most of them won't have another virtual event because it's too much for them.
Yeah, so probably the fact that you need to stay again in front of a screen.
Yes.
Yeah.
But maybe it's because of the 2020 event more than general negative.
That's true. I mean, we have probably to find somehow the balance between virtual and in-person events. Definitely, we have the benefits, but from like environmental things and accessibility. But at the same time, in-person events are much more effective for in-depth discussions, decisions, for example, for or getting more, I would say, innovation as well.
Yeah, and you know, this leads on quite nicely to the in-person events, is that a lot of the networking and discussion goes on not in the talks but at lunchtime or afterwards. And so these are some real positive points. But one of the things I think is important to remember is the way that we traditionally run in-person events can be very exclusive of certain groups. So if you have your poster session, which usually is early career people, and often Black and ethnic minorities are more represented in the poster session, where they're more likely to do posters because they're not in the senior positions yet. These are often alcohol-centered events that are in the evening. So people are either bored and gone home, or they're just there to have a few drinks and have some fun. And if you don't drink or you don't want to be around drunk people, this is very difficult. And so I think that one thing we can consider in virtual events is putting the poster sessions earlier in the day in the middle, and you can have an evening one as well, for sure. There's nothing wrong with people wanting to go along in the evening or have a glass of wine, but we should make sure that people aren't excluded because of people's interest in doing that. Also, a lot of the time, the food at these events, they haven't catered for everyone's dietary requirements. And so people who are often at a disadvantage already as an early career person and low income, who have any kind of dietary requirement and now have to arrange their own food. And often these conference centers and stuff, they're in the middle of nowhere, or they only have one sandwich place that has a limited menu and has a massive queue at lunchtime. So I think we can do a better job of spending some of those very expensive conference fees on making sure there is food for everybody there and refreshments for everybody there that suits everyone. And it's not that difficult to do. Some conferences do it really well. Any other points? Anybody got things to say that work well to increase outreach and accessibility in person?
I would add here that lack of accessibility in many cases where people are not able to join, or overlapping responsibilities also. While in virtual events we can go or attend many different events, but at the same time is again the balance that the quality is decreased when we are at the same time on many different events. I don't know, anything as a negative point for in-person event. I would say that all the pros can be here the negative, where you have higher costs, where you have to organize a huge event, and all the way around a lot of flights to attend a meeting, many people moving. So I think we can move to the second session, if you agree. And just to avoid missing time, we can stay all together, and you can just like share your ideas. What do you think?
Yeah, that's great.
Yes, I think it's better.
We're not so many at this point, so.
Yeah. So the second, we can also share this this presentation with you to get some insights. The second breakout session is about actually thinking about how you would present or communicate scientific topics, scientific results in that case, from which I have chosen as a case study the NASA mission, which is the Mars 2020, which already launched and landed on February 18. So the main goals of the mission are presented here, but just to highlight it, is going to look for some biosignatures or fossils. And we want you to think about how you would present the results of such a mission to different audiences. So here are the questions. How would you present the results at different audiences? What are the strategies or tools you would apply when preparing a presentation or an outreach event? And during our talks, I think we gave some ideas, but you can give your ideas as well. And potential audiences could be these ones. So students of different ages, undergraduate students, university students, early career scientists, the adults from the general public, and finally, scientists from non-planetary fields. So it would be nice if you could think for a moment, and then we can actually again do some brainstorming here. While you have thought about it, we can type some keywords. So I'm going again back to this slide where you can see the main goals. And then gradually I will move to the presentation. Are there any thoughts or questions already?
So you should be able to see the screen. Anastasia is sharing her screen showing the Mars 2020 Perseverance key goals. And yeah, we just want your ideas. If you're presenting to different audiences, so not just other planetary scientists, but school students or adults from the general public, or a field of scientists who have nothing to do with planetary, what are some key things that you would take into account when you're talking to people trying to convey this information? So feel free to anyone jump in or put in the chat your ideas.
Yeah, either talk or write, type in the chat.
I think one important thing is to provide really a background context that explains why we're presenting these results in the first place. For example, for this case, I would start by explaining how this lander got to Mars and why we sent rovers to Mars. Because sometimes people jump straight into the thick of the subject, and whenever people do that, even in very specialized presentations in my field, I'm always a bit lost because I need context to understand the entire presentation.
That's very true. And I think, when you write a paper or something, you have to put the kind of background section, right? And you explain what literature is already there, why it's important. And people tend to not do that so much in talks. And I think that is a really key point that people should do more. And it's hard when you've only got sort of 10 or 15 minutes to talk. But if you sent in a paper with no background or rationale for why this work is important and how it relates to previous work in the field, it would get rejected. So we should really do that for talks and give people an introduction. That's a really good point.
Thanks. This is pretty much for everyone, but yeah, it's more important for, I would say, yeah, other scientists. We consider things as given usually, and it's a good point.
Any other thoughts from anyone?
Zach raised his hand.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think one of the things, whenever I find myself talking about life on Mars and the rovers there, is managing expectations about what we mean when we say life on Mars, because so many people, especially kids, have this idea that there's going to be buildings or aliens walking around, or even like fossils like ammonites or something. So I find, yeah, putting it in perspective of the fossils we're looking for are really, really, really old and are probably only single-celled is a good place to start, so that people don't get this, this built-up idea in their heads of seeing an incredible dinosaur fossil in the Martian rocks or something.
That's so true. And you know, a lot of people I speak to who are not in any kind of planetary science, they think we already found life on Mars. They're like, oh, didn't they already find that? There's already like bacteria there. So yeah, I think that's really, really important. But at the same time, you know, making people understand why it is still really exciting. And, you know, in some ways, talking about exoplanets or icy moons can be more fun because we know so little about them compared to Mars, where we know, you know, there's probably nothing there, and if there is, it's very, very tiny, whereas we can be like, maybe there's squid on Europa. So you can still let them dream. One really good tip I got actually for doing talks is if you try explaining your talk in like, let's say 10 minutes, you can go through quite a lot. Then try doing it in 5, then try doing it in 2, then try doing it in like 15 or 30 seconds, and you'll really concentrate down what the important points are. If you can't get it all those important points into 30 seconds, then you know all the rest of it doesn't really matter. It's those key points that you can expand on, and that's a really good way of knowing what you should keep in your talk and what you should discard. But thanks for that, Zach. I think that's a really important point, especially when you're talking to non-scientists and kids. Is really, really key.
I would add that to the adults of the general public because it's also important for them. Yeah, good one. Anyone else?
Yeah, following this path, I think that is interesting a lot for a school student, even in the high school or in primary school, to carry with you something that they can touch or whatever. So maybe introducing a microscope with some bacteria or whatever that they can see that there is something that is live, that is not only people or dogs or cats. I think it could be a good way to put them in some context, that there is some other life that is also interesting, and it could be in an early Mars.
Yeah, that's really nice. And I think you can also use this kind of like props to be more inclusive. We had a whole bunch of like 3D printed stuff from like the terrain of Mars. And that way, even people who have visual impairments can still engage and feel what the terrain feels like and get an idea of the scale of like Olympus Mons on Mars by feeling the 3D printed terrain. So these sorts of interactive things that can be enjoyed in many different ways can make it much more inclusive and fun for everyone.
Yeah, I guess for like school students especially, I think just having like a grasp of what they already know and kind of adjusting your language to kind of fit with that. Because like a lot of the time, I guess school students won't have covered like a lot of the science that you need. So just making sure you're not like diving straight into even like looking at electrons and protons or whatever, where they might not have like necessarily covered that already.
Yeah, that's really important, because then there's no point, you know, going too deep. And it also works the other way. You're not saying stuff that they already know and being condescending. You can use that feedback, which is what's another great thing about in-person, or if you're doing virtual, you can get people to send in advance like what they already know and what they want to know about from like a list of questions, and that can help you tailor your talk, and it really helps you not blindside people with too much information, and equally not be patronizing to people that already know this. So I think that's a really good point, Peter, to know your audience, engage what they want to know, what's useful to them.
Yeah, I think this is this is something that we always have to consider, right? And it's a good point to make. Anything else you would consider, particularly for either students of universities or early career scientists? Maybe we can put them together.
Yeah, I have an idea. Maybe a good thing to do is to make a link between what they learn at school and what we want to share with us for graduate students.
Mm-hmm.
I think, in my experience, I think it's a good idea because it makes a purpose on what they learn at school, and maybe they can extrapolate them to work in science or science studies in general.
Yeah, I think that's one good point with the knowledge they have gained. I'm just like thinking that undergraduate students could be also from, I don't know, from other scientific fields or anyone in general. I'm just thinking now that the main difference between students of schools and universities is that the university student is starting to think more broadly and having a broader picture about the world and how things work. So maybe that's a good point. Connections also with other fields. I don't know what do you think?
There is another important difference between the undergraduate student and the school students is that the undergraduate students are beginning to think about her own future. I mean,
Yeah.
the work and everything. So present it like a work that you could did in the future. It could be also interesting for undergraduate or even PhD.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point. And so kind of going back to some of the stuff that I was saying in my talk is like, what's the next step? What's the next step on that bridge to get you there? And so explaining to them, if you want to become a scientist, this is the stuff you can do, or these are resources to like conferences you can go to or workshops that you can go to. These are newsletters you can sign up to. And that stuff is just as important, I think, for the older school students and the undergraduates, that, this is how you get on that path to learning more rather than just the scientific content. And so that's something you might not want to put to sort of scientists from non-planetary fields. They don't want to see PhD and workshop opportunities for early career scientists. Maybe they're more interested in the content, whereas people in undergraduate and late teen students, they want to know like, okay, well, how do I do this as a job? How do I get a PhD in it? That's really important.
Nice. And one more thing maybe for your fellows, like where we are now, probably in conferences, what we could, when we talk to, people that have already scientific background and probably similar to our. There is anything?
For me, funding was a big one here, because this postdoc, PhD postdoc, you just need money to do stuff, right? So, seeing funded opportunities and how to win awards, how to write a proposal, this kind of stuff becomes very important for early career scientists, I think.
But connecting with the mission, how you would connect that?
So, for example, I saw that it's closed now, but there was recently like an opportunity to apply to go and work on the Insight mission team for like PhD and postdoc type career stage people. And so you could talk about that and say that, these are the kind of opportunities that are available for you to get involved in a mission similar to this, a Mars mission that's looking at the surface. And so I think at that stage, it is a bit more similar to the undergraduate. They're looking for opportunities and ways to get experience and get involved. Also, obviously for early career scientists, they might want to know about the latest findings and the latest publications that have come out, which is something undergraduate and school students might want to go all the way back to sort of Viking and Mariner missions, whereas your early career stuff want to know the cutting edge stuff, like what images have come back today, what have we learned this week from Curiosity.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. So I would say also publications, because they have the, let's say, the background to read that themselves. You don't need to explain that. And the funding or opportunities as well in general. Funding.
I was just going to add one more. Just the availability of new data to work with as well. That's one of the things I'm always excited about with a new mission. Where are all the pictures? Where are the pictures, and can I get access to them?
That's a good one. Yes. So I think it's part of the opportunities as well. So availability of data, or ways they can get involved in the mission.
I'm conscious that we're running a little bit over. So Anastasia, can I ask you to just go down to the slide with the resources?
Yes.
And we can send this out to you. I put just a bunch of different links to different articles and papers and websites that are quite useful about how you should run scientific and virtual conferences to make them accessible, about teaching strategies. There's a website where you can put anything into it and it will show you what it looks like for different types of color blindness, how to put real-time captions and stuff and transcripts for your talks. And there's also a really great company called AAT Transcribes, and it's run by disabled people who are able to transcribe any of your work for you and make sure it's accessible to everyone. So check them out on Twitter. So yeah, we can send these links out to you, and they can be very useful for making sure that the talks you give can really reach as many people as possible.
Yep. All right. So let's leave it here. We can have this presentation shared with you. Thank you everyone for participating, for your insights. Erica, would you like?
Yeah, thank you very much, both of you. This was very nice. I'm sorry that we were running late, so you had our delay on your shoulders. So I'm very sorry about that. But I think it was fruitful at the end, even though many people left. Yeah, I think we brainstormed something nice. And yeah, thank you very much. You will meet probably Anastasia again during the brainstorming of the outreach working group. Not sure if she will be there or Zach.
Yeah, I will do my best to attend all the outreach sessions. Definitely.
But in any case, if you're interested in outreach, you can join the working group and help them. And yeah, thanks to the useful tips by Jacqueline and also by Anastasia, I think now you have some more instruments for doing outreach. So thank you, everyone, and see you tomorrow.
Jose,
thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
See you.
I just
Yes.
want to say something to Jacqueline, that I really connected with what you said about when you talk about what you do, especially in astrophysics, with somebody else who's not versed on that matter, they think, oh, that looks very complicated. And I always try to this deconstruct the taboo that science is only for the expert. So I really connected with what you said, because I constantly say it to anyone not in science. Science is not for the brainiacs; it's for everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything, for both of you, Anastasia and Jacqueline, for all your talks.
Thank you. When we send out the PowerPoint, my email address, maybe I can put it on there. And guys, please email me if you want to get in touch or anything. Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, thank you all. Thanks, Jacqueline, Erica, for organizing everything. And yeah, join the outreach activities next days if you're interested for doing outreach. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. And
Goodbye. Ok, vai a scrivere la tua tesi adesso. Ciao.
Domani, Battista.